It's been said, and I think it bears repeating, that unborn child in her mother's womb, she's a baby.
A baby has its own DNA, has its own blood type, has its own heartbeat. As an EMT, we have an obligation to treat someone that has a heartbeat. Killing is never health care. I've heard that more times that this is going to affect health care. Health care builds, health care protects, health care stands up and tries to make people healthier. It doesn't try to make people stop living. It doesn't try to stop their heartbeats.
Hi, I'm Drew Zahn with the Family Leader, just outside of Iowa Senate Room 22, where a subcommittee meeting was just held on a heartbeat bill, a bill that would ban abortions in Iowa after detection of a heartbeat by the baby there. And I've got two people with me here. One is Iowa State Senator Jason Schultz, and the other is the Family Leader's family policy advocate, Danny Carroll. And I want to take just a minute to ask Senator Schultz, in the course of the arguments, because there was testimony on both sides, very passionate on both sides, and some arguments were brought up regarding health care, some comments were brought up regarding women's rights, and some were brought up regarding the baby herself. And in the course of that meeting, at the very end, when it came time to basically take the vote, you said there were some arguments that you found convincing and others you didn't. Would you explain to us why?
Well, this would be the issue in which trying to claim that killing is health care is not going to persuade me. Doctors take an oath. Doctors are trained to build people up. They're trained to heal people. They are not trained to stop a heartbeat. So to call any action of this bill a reduction in health care is completely unacceptable. I won't accept that. That's not going to be persuasive. Health care is what you do to heal people, to build them up, to restore them, and stopping a heartbeat does not do that. We also heard from a letter. We also heard a letter read from an association director, OBGYNs, that wanted to claim science and politics is getting into science. And I think it's very clear that the science is clear. Life starts at fertilization. Politics has crept into this, but it is from those who are trying to redefine conception, not from those who are trying to call killing healthcare. So that's not persuasive whatsoever.
You bring up that good point. Throughout the course of all of the arguments that were given, many of the arguments simply ignored, even dodged the question, the question of when does life begin? It's the ultimate pivotal question here, because all of the arguments about social impact and all the arguments about monetary issues and even the arguments about the women who are impacted, if we don't first answer the question, when does life begin?
Yes.
Even the arguments about constitutionality, Roe v. Wade talked about, yes, a woman has a certain right, but only after we consider, is the baby, is the fetus a baby? And if that baby is a person, then according to the 14th Amendment,
they are protected and given full rights as a person.
Exactly. Key issue. Now, there were several other testimonials that were heard from members of the Iowa Coalition of Pro-Life Leaders, and some of them from the Family Leader. Greg Baker was heard from, Chuck Hurley was heard from, and Danny Carroll. You also gave testimony where you really boiled things down. I wonder if you might share with us what you told the subcommittee today.
You know, Drew, that subcommittee would not have even met were it not for the fact that an unborn child is a baby, or as we say, she's a baby. And this heartbeat bill that is being considered and passed out of this subcommittee is just one more confirmation that with a heartbeat, she's a baby. That message was conveyed. I think we had 7 or 8 different people testify independently in support of the legislation. Also, I was kind of struck, Senator, that there were 14, I counted them, 14 state senators in that room for most of that hour. That tells you the level of interest and support, because most of those 14 were Republicans. I expect this legislation to pass the Iowa Senate and do so by funnel date next week.
I expect so too. As we all agree that science is clear, life starts at conception, at fertilization. We tried that last year with the same names and individuals here in the same General Assembly. We carried it as far as we could. We ran just a little bit short of votes, not short of argument, because the science is clear. However, so this year, we've moved to not the step that we want in the end, but we've moved to a point that addressed all of the concerns of those who couldn't quite join us last year on Judiciary Committee and on the floor. I'm looking for this to come out of the Senate, actually, in the end. And we have a few issues, to take care of as far as talking points and arguments, a little research on the opposition points, but we'll take care of those. And I think we're going to see this move.
Great news today. The heartbeat bill, as Danny shared, passed out of the subcommittee. Part of that was the vote of Senator Schultz right here. The next step will be a full committee. It has to pass out of there, then the floor of the House. Then before it can become law, similar legislation has to, did I say floor of the House? Floor of the Senate. Yes. Then similar legislation has to be passed out of the House before it would go to the governor's desk. Many arguments heard today on both sides, but we've been having these arguments. We've heard these arguments for more than 45 years. And there are many valid concerns that were brought up on both sides. But there is one truth that we can't argue away. All three of us here agree. That little girl in her mother's womb, she's a baby.
There are two heartbeats that have affected my life pretty significantly. At 19 years old, I found myself pregnant. And I remember it at my very first visit with my obstetrician, my gynecologist, hearing that child's heartbeat and knowing that he was alive. He was not a blob of tissues. He was a child in my body, but a separate human being on his own. And that heartbeat affected me. The other heartbeat that has affected me profoundly is the one that stopped. The heartbeat of my dad. He was pronounced dead when his heartbeat stopped. We are passing a bill that identifies what we all intrinsically know to be true, that these are human beings.
Today I work with women across the state of Iowa and in this Midwest region who are struggling following the decision to have an abortion. Many were never able to conceive a child again, and those that did were deeply disturbed when they first heard that first heartbeat. They immediately realized the abortion took the life of a baby. There was a beating heart, a human being, their baby. It left them to navigate grief, guilt, remorse, anger, depression, anxiety. The things that they thought were being resolved with the abortion were only escalated. They were affected mentally, emotionally, many times physically and spiritually. I'm going to be brief and just end with a couple questions. As a community nation state, what do we value? Should not our legislators and representatives protect and stand up for people that are young, both before birth and after?
And I'm speaking from the institution of the church this morning to the institution of government. You guys have a very difficult job on a very, very sensitive issue. And the government is the institution of justice. That is your main primary responsibility at the end of the day. And you are tasked, senators, to bring fair justice to all people. And that's not always easy. And we in the church, we do not have that authority. We can do our best to give you guidance from that. From the evangelical church, I obviously believe in the inerrancy of God's word. Not everyone in America believes that. That's the joys of religious liberty and the First Amendment. But it's also even a biblical principle as God gives people free will. But I do believe God is real, and I believe his Bible is true. And I do believe life even begins prior to conception in God's word. God has ordained every life, and he wants to live it to his fullest. God values life. He values life so much that he sent his son to die for our lives. And the church definitely needs to do a better job in helping the brokenhearted. There's many brokenhearted in this room. The church should not only rise and against God's laws bigger than against God's laws for life, and it protects people from death. But I appeal to you today as the kings of our land in America, as the institution of justice. There is a proverb that I think is very relevant for you all today. It's a mother writing to her son who was a king. She says, "Speak for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of those who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and the needy." And you have the task to speak and bring justice for all life. That includes the mother, and it also includes the child in the womb.